Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Nos programmes offrent plusieurs langues. Veuillez visiter suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Nuestros programas ofrecen varios idiomas. Visite suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Chương trình của chúng tôi cung ứng nhiều ngôn ngữ. Xin xem suprememastertv.com/schedule.
Urgency of climate change.
Accelerating climate change.
Global warming.
Climate change as a poverty.
Climate change caused $500 billion of damage.
Global emissions continue to rise in the last decade and have reached their highest point in history. As a consequence, global emissions are on track to blow past the 1.5 degrees Celsius warning limit, which was envisioned in the 2015 Paris Agreement.
United Nations reports, "It's now or never to stop climate change." Part 2 of 2. Continue watching to find out more.
If you are an elite individual, you educate yourself in nutrition. By default, you become a vegan. Bryant Jennings, vegan.
Prazer em conhecê-lo. Noble viewers, that means nice to meet you in Portuguese, the official language of the Açores. My name is Gilma. The virtuous people of the Açores wish that world leaders would quickly enact vegan laws to halt climate change before it's too late. May world peace soon be realized for all beings to enjoy. Welcome to the concluding episode of our two-part series. United Nations reports it's now or never to stop climate change. In February and April 2022, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, released Parts 2 and 3 of its comprehensive Sixth Assessment Report, or AR6. The Part 3 report, released on April 4, 2022, provides an updated status on greenhouse gas emissions, global warming, and worldwide mitigation efforts, and the results are deeply concerning.
Global emissions continue to rise in the last decade and have reached their highest point in history. As a consequence, global emissions are on track to blow past the 1.5 degrees Celsius warning limit, which was envisioned in the 2015 Paris Agreement.
The report states that human-induced climate change is widespread, rapid, and intensifying. Global temperatures are at the high end of what modelers had earlier predicted and are increasing more rapidly than estimated. Thus, the IPCC is calling for immediate and drastic cuts to greenhouse gas emissions, stating, limiting warming to around 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit requires global greenhouse gas emissions to peak before 2025 at the latest and be reduced by 43% by 2030. At the same time, methane would also need to be reduced by about a third. The report states that even at the current level of global warming, 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the world is in danger. From heat waves in India, floods in South Africa and Australia, and wildfires and water shortages in California, people all around the globe are suffering from the devastating effects of climate change. The IPCC Part 2 report, released on February 28, 2022, estimates that even today, at least 3.3 billion people are highly vulnerable to the devastating effects of global warming, with many already exposed to food and water shortages. It states that unless we make dramatic reductions in emissions, more than 140 million people will become climate change refugees by 2050. UN Secretary-General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, refers to the current situation as the Atlas of Human Suffering, saying, "Nearly half of humanity is living in the danger zone now. Many ecosystems are at the point of no return now." Professor Robert McClellan, one of the authors of the Part 2 review, says that anyone who thinks they are safe from the effects of global warming needs to take a hard look at this report, because it puts to bed any idea that any of us is exempt from these risks. Scientists warn that as temperatures continue to rise, we face increasingly devastating droughts, fires, floods, hurricanes, and rising sea levels. In fact, many climate disasters are already happening all around the globe. In May 2022, while much of India was suffering from record-breaking heat, the northeast was inundated with heavy rains. In Assam, more than 400,000 people were displaced when floods and mudslides washed away crops and homes. Meanwhile, in May 2022, a drought in the western USA was creating havoc for millions of people.
Western states are experiencing the worst mega drought in at least 1,200 years.
The drought has fueled wildfires and threatened the economic security of farmers. Lake Powell, the second largest man-made reservoir in the country, is drying up.
In April, a heat wave in Pakistan caused such rapid melting of mountain glaciers that surrounding lakes and rivers became flooded, with a crucial bridge in northern Pakistan getting washed away. While the IPCC Part 3 report discusses alternative energy technologies and their potential to mitigate CO2 emissions, it also states that shifting to green energy alone is insufficient to stop global warming.
But, says the UN, harnessing the power of the sun and the wind will not be enough.
The report details how we'll also need to change the way we get around, what we eat, how efficient our homes and businesses are, how we farm, how we produce the goods we buy, how we move those goods around, and how we protect the natural world.
The IPCC report recognizes that methane is an essential key to halting climate change and calls for a 30% reduction in methane emissions by 2030. Two reasons for reducing methane emissions are critical. First, methane is a much hotter greenhouse gas than CO2. The United Nations Environmental Programme, or UNEP, states that over a 20-year period, methane has 80 times more heat-trapping capacity than CO2. Climate activists have referred to methane as a blowtorch for accelerating climate change compared to the slow boil provided by CO2. Second, methane disappears from the atmosphere much more quickly. Even if CO2 emissions were reduced to zero, the current emissions could remain in the atmosphere for hundreds of years, continuing to warm the Earth. In contrast, methane disappears in about a decade. Thus, reducing methane emissions is the fastest way to halt global warming. Administrator of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Dr. Richard Spinrad, says, reducing methane emissions is an important tool we can use right now to lessen the impacts of climate change in the near term and reduce the rate of warming. Inger Andersen, Executive Director of the UNEP, echoes this conclusion, saying, cutting methane is the strongest lever we have to slow climate change. She adds, we need international cooperation to urgently reduce methane emissions as much as possible this decade. Recognizing that methane is the key to halting climate change, what is the fastest way to reduce emissions? While methane comes from several sources, one major source is the digestive process of the billions of animal people raised for so-called food. Consequently, many scientific studies conclude that the fastest way to lower methane emissions is to reduce the raising of livestock and make a widespread shift to the plant-based lifestyle. One such study by Dr. Joseph Poore and Dr. Thomas Nemesic, published in the 2018 peer-reviewed journal Science, reports that meat and dairy production creates 60% of agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions. In addition, raising livestock is highly inefficient, using approximately 83% of Earth's farmland while providing only 18% of the world's calories. Joseph Poore, the lead author of the study, stated, a vegan diet is probably the single biggest way to reduce your impact on planet Earth. Not just greenhouse gases, but global acidification, eutrophication, land use, and water use. It is far bigger than cutting down on your flights or buying an electric car. The April 2022 IPCC report also calls for a global change in diet, stating, diet high in plant protein and low in meat and dairy are associated with lower greenhouse gas emissions. Jim Ski, co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 3, adds, climate change is the result of more than a century of unsustainable energy and land use, lifestyles, and patterns of consumption and production. He stresses the extreme urgency of making deep cuts to all greenhouse gas emissions, including methane, saying, "It's now or never if we want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit.
This year, not next year, this week, not next week, today, not tomorrow." And that would really be the message. We need to get on with this now, or 1.5 degrees will slip beyond reach.
Our most gracious Supreme Master Ching Hai often reminds us about the urgent need to stop climate change and that the quickest solution for saving our planet is through a global shift to the noble, compassionate vegan lifestyle.
Our climate is accelerating. Our world is in danger. But you seem to still go around forever in a circle, maybe still thinking of what to do. You mention anything, but not the center target. We target many other areas, but not the center point. Just like scratching outside of the thick socks does not relieve the itch. By now, scientists have warned us x times, many times, repeatedly, by evidence, that vegan is the best, most effective way to reduce global warming. Reducing or stopping climate change, stabilizing it, is good for all of us, human and animal, people, tenants. But there's no time to think now. Please, do act quickly. We must stop all this.
All information concerning the scientific evidence of climate change and its solution is in Supreme Master Ching Hai's book, From Crisis to Peace, free for download at crisis2peace.org.
We're deeply grateful to Supreme Master Ching Hai for sharing this profound wisdom, especially during this perilous time for planet Earth. We pray that all people will quickly heed your words and that we will soon live in a safe, compassionate vegan world.
Vegan cause real humans are against atrocity.
Warm-hearted viewers, thank you for joining us today. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television for The Kind Work of the Blue Peony Foundation, Part 2 of 2, coming up next right after Noteworthy News. May your love expand to include all beings, both human and animal people alike, on our amazingly beautiful planet.
Our programs offer many languages. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule and suprememastertv.com/PE.